It is 1 p.m. in Damascus at 6 a.m. in Washington. I'm Monita Rajpal. This is World One, live from London. Also ahead, falling temperatures, rising death toll from Britain to Bulgaria. Europe's killer cold spell tightens its grip. Syrian city of Homs is under attack as the international community watches on, unsure about what it can do to help end the violence. Some activists say at least 30 people have been killed in the past few hours as government forces fire shells on the city. That's on top of 300 or more casualties in the past 3 days. It says 6,000 people have died in the unrest in Syria. Activists say the deadlock at the Security Council has given the Syrian regime the green light to redouble its attacks on civilians. CNN has restricted access to Syria. So Arwa Damon joins us now from Beirut in Lebanon. And for U.S. reaction, we'll go to Jill Doherty in Washington. Arwa, let's begin with you in Beirut and tell us a little bit more what's happening right now in the city of Homs and why that city is seeing this onslaught of attack.
Well, for quite some time now, for around the last 6 months, the flashpoint city of Homs has really been the epicenter of these clashes that we've been seeing taking place between government forces and elements of the Free Syrian Army, the opposition fighting force that's made up mostly of military defectors. So it's been quite intense there. But what we really saw taking place since Thursday, Friday, was this intensified effort on the part of Syrian government forces to go in and literally, it would seem, according to activists, wipe out the opposition once and for all. The violence there, the deaths, the casualties have really reached unprecedented levels since this uprising began. Activists are describing a non-stop onslaught, a barrage of mortar and rocket fire, and no one is being spared the violence. There are chilling videos that have been emerging online, not just of adult casualties, but of children as well. No one seeming to be able to protect themselves from this government onslaught. Activists are not just describing their disgust with what transpired at the United Nations, but also their horror and anger, saying that the international community, because of its inability to unite over Syria, is in effect just as culpable when it comes to the bloodshed as the Assad regime itself, Monita.
Meanwhile, the Syrian regime, the Assad regime, is saying that they're doing this because of against terrorist or armed gangs that are still at play there. What evidence have they shown that that's exactly the case?
Yeah, and that's been the argument that the Syrian government has been putting forward ever since this uprising began, saying that it is quite simply targeting these armed terrorist gangs that are part of some sort of foreign-fueled conspiracy. And it is, in fact, going so far as to deny that this crackdown in Homs is taking place. Over the weekend, Syria's ambassador to the UN called the onslaught a media fabrication, a clear contradiction to those images that we have been seeing emerging from the flashpoint city of Homs. When it comes to evidence, well, the government has on occasion put forward alleged confessions on television, put forward images, it says, of weapons caches that it has uncovered, but it has not really been able to convince the international community that this is in fact what is taking place in Syria. And what we do see are these two complete and opposite narratives. The government saying that it is targeting these armed gangs, the opposition saying that the Free Syrian Army is quite simply trying to defend the people, that they are by and large a peaceful movement. The issue is that as polarizing as this uprising is inside Syria, it is just as polarizing on the international stage as well. And as long as the international community is unable to unite on Syria, the Assad regime is effectively not going to have any sort of motivation to try to alter the current course that it is on. The Assad regime, fully aware of the divisions that exist, fully aware that up until now it does have the support of international powerhouses like Russia and China, is going to gain a certain measure of confidence in that knowledge and is not necessarily going to be encouraged to try to bring about any sort of end to this current onslaught, Monita.
All right, Arwa, thank you for that. We want to talk a little bit more about that polarization of views there at the United Nations. Let's go to Jill Doherty, who joins us now from Washington. We're seeing some strong words there coming from the United States against Russia and China. For example, uses of words such as travesty, and the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Rice, saying that the blood of any future blood spilled will be on Russia and China's hands.
Right, Monita, I think you'd have to say that this is pretty extraordinary when it comes to diplomacy. And
Jill, thank you. Jill Doherty there in Washington and Arwa Damon in Beirut. Thank you both so much. Weeks of protest over painful austerity measures in Romania have brought down the Prime Minister. Emil Boc made the announcement a few hours ago. Journalist Liliana Ciobanu joins us now by Skype from the Romanian capital, Bucharest. Liliana, what happens now? As much as the Prime Minister was looking for some sort of stability, is there a sense that there is even more now political instability?
Well, that's right. This decision comes after more than 3 weeks of anti-government protests in Romania.
Thank you so much for that. Liliana Ciobanu there joining us from Bucharest. Well, heavy snow and freezing temperatures blasting across Eastern Europe have claimed the lives of more than 250 people. It is the worst winter there in decades. Most of the misery is being felt in Ukraine, where temperatures have sunk as low as minus 36 degrees Celsius. Icy weather is blowing in from Siberia. It has caused temperatures in the Russian capital, Moscow, to fall to lows of minus 20 degrees. CNN's Phil Black is there. He joins us now there live. Phil, this is your first winter in Russia. What's it like for you?
Well, Monita, it is certainly very, very cold indeed, I can tell you. Russia is a country that is used to bitter, often deadly winters, and that is...
Phil, thank you. Phil Black there in Moscow. Well, as Phil was saying, the forecasters are predicting an extended cold snap. Let's go to our Mari Ramos at the World Weather Center. So we're looking at middle of February at the very least for this to continue until...
Yeah, it's going to be a while. You know, I think that's going to be the greatest hardship. It has been the greatest hardship for people across Europe.
Ouch, pretty chilly. All right, Mari, thank you very much. You are watching World One live from London. In Greece, a dangerous deadlock. Members of Greece's coalition government are resuming emergency talks with the Prime Minister. Lucas Papademos is trying to get an agreement for even deeper cuts in spending amid a threat that bailout funds will be cut off. Greece's international creditors are threatening to cut off credit if the main parties can't agree to reforms designed to bring the country's finances under control. Separate talks on the European crisis are taking place in Paris. Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel is in town to meet French President Nicolas Sarkozy. They've been working closely on a coordinated response to the debt crisis, and Mrs. Merkel doesn't want Mr. Sarkozy to be turfed out in April's presidential election. Senior international correspondent Jim Bitterman joins us now from Paris with more on that and what could possibly come out of this meeting when they've had no luck really coming out of any other meetings that they've had so far.
Well, this, in fact, is one of a series of meetings. This is the 14th of these summits.
All right, Jim, thank you. Jim Bitterman there in Paris. Well, events in Greece have put a damper on European stocks. The markets have started the week in the red. Then London, the FTSE 100 is currently trading down almost 0.25%. The etc. DAX in Germany down 0.5%. In Paris, live from London. In Egypt, there are plans to transfer former President Hosni Mubarak to a prison hospital. He is still on trial, accused of ordering a murderous crackdown on protesters last year. You're watching World One live from London. More lives lost in Eastern Europe as the region is hit by the worst winter weather in decades. We'll bring you more on that in just a moment. Plus, come back now to the story of Europe's freezing weather. The extreme cold has dragged on for more than a week in some places and stretched from Moscow and Kiev in the east and as far south as North Africa. A large dump of snow fell on Britain over the weekend, disrupting one of the world's busiest airports. CNN's Atika Schubert joins us now live from London's Heathrow. How are things looking there? Snow seems to have cleared up a little bit.
No, it's a lot better today. There's no cancellations and so far no delays that we know of, but clearly some knock-on effects from yesterday when nearly half of the flights were canceled. And so there was a bit of preemptive canceling that went on. Nonetheless, they're going to have to take another look at how they deal with this because they do have a lot of angry passengers.
Indeed. All right. Atika, thank you so much for that. Atika Schubert there at Heathrow. Russia and China are defending their actions after blocking a UN resolution that would have criticized the violence in Syria. Russia says passing a resolution on Syria would have meant taking sides in what they're calling a civil war. Disturbing amateur video that is emerging from Syria. This vision appears to be from a hospital in Homs. CNN cannot verify its authenticity. Take a look. Again, what you're seeing there is amateur video that's coming out of Syria. We want to go now, take you there, in Abu Said and Ibrin, which is near the Syrian capital, Damascus. And of course, we cannot show you his face for security reasons. Thank you so much for being with us. Can you describe what the situation is like where you are, sir?
Thank you. We're now witnessing the shelling of the city of Kafabatna, which is about 5 kilometers to the...
What newspapers around the world are saying about this. Here in the UK, the headline in The Guardian is Putin has misread Syria. It's a comment piece that says Putin, backed by the Slovaki who run the military and have invested billions in Syria, may think his policy on Assad is good tactics. It stops an intervention that the West was never going to make, but it makes for terrible strategy. The veto sets Russia on the opposition side of the table from the Arab League. Well, in the United Arab Emirates, Gulf News has this headline, Syria at the point of no return. It's an opinion piece that goes on to say the Syrian regime will eventually fall, but not before rivers of blood flow and not before the economy is completely destroyed. As a result, Syria's sovereignty will be compromised and its people will suffer for years to come. And finally, in China, the China Daily has this headline, Avoiding Civil War in Syria. It's an editorial that says it is not a question of whether Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad should step down or not. It is whether the ever-worsening crisis in the country will be brought to an end in such a way that the country will not be plunged into a sectarian civil war and its people plunged into even greater misery. CNN senior international correspondent Nick Robertson just returned now from Syria. He's seen the unrest firsthand. He joins us now here in the studio. Nick, thanks so much for being with us. You've covered these conflicts from Egypt to Syria as well, and a lot of people are comparing the two. They're saying NATO, the coalition forces, and the international community rallied around the Egyptians, but they don't seem to be doing that with Syria. Why do you think that is? What's the difference?
There's no political will to get involved in Syria. It is very clear to the international community that there's a high price of making mistakes, i.e. going in
closer to any resolution on the diplomacy front. Nick, thank you so much for that. You're watching World One live from London. The New York Giants have the bragging rights in the NFL for the next 12 months after winning Super Bowl 46. Alex Thomas is here with the details of what I've been told was a dramatic night, dramatic finish.
It was, and dramatically, you'll have to wait just a moment to see it because we start with some breaking sports news. And Spain's Alberto Contador faces being stripped of at least one of his 3 Tour de France cycling titles. Of course he is.
We weren't invited, but of course he is.
I'm surprised you didn't get an invite.
I know, I'm surprised too. Golf, didn't know it was so emotional. Frustrating maybe, but didn't realize it was that emotional.
I know, he's going to finally be in a tournament and not end up crying at the end of the week one of these days.
Poor guy. At least he's showing some emotion. It's
exactly.
all good. He's not stoic. Thank you for that, Alex. It's not a job for the faint-hearted, but Britain's Queen Elizabeth is still going strong 6 decades after her accession to the throne. Just a World One live from London. We are approaching almost 7 a.m. in New York. It's almost 1 p.m. in Berlin, and it is almost 9 p.m. for you in Tokyo. Prime ministers, U.S. presidents, and countless other heads of state. Queen Elizabeth has seen them all come and go in her 6 decades on the throne. Now Britain's monarch is marking exactly 60 years since she was first crowned queen. That was back in 1952 when the death of her father, King George VI, thrust the young princess onto the world stage. These are scheduled for June. Well, Queen Elizabeth becomes only the 2nd British monarch to reach the 60-year milestone. Only her great-grandmother, Queen Victoria, served for longer. CNN's royal correspondent Max Foster joins us now from outside Buckingham Palace with more on that. Max.
Yeah, Monita, a very big day for the Queen because this is the day, as you say, 60 years ago, June.
And you'll be there for us covering it. We know that for sure. Royal correspondent there, Max Foster. Thank you so much. You're watching World One live from London. I'm Monita Rajpal. We thank you for joining us. We'll update you of the news headlines at the top of the hour. Stay with us right here on CNN.